The dust from the departing stagecoach still hung in the air when Sophia Pierce realized her entire life had just rolled away without her. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared down the empty road, the Montana Territory stretching endlessly before her in the golden light of sunset, 1875. "Wait," she shouted again, though the coach was long gone, her voice breaking on the wind. "Please wait." Sophia collapsed onto her trunk, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. Her fiancé, Harrison Wells, had promised to wait for her while she bid farewell to the station master, an old friend of her father's. But when she'd returned, Harrison, her luggage, and the coach were gone, leaving her with nothing but the dress on her back and a small handbag containing little more than a handkerchief and a photograph of her parents. The truth settled over her like a cold blanket. Harrison hadn't forgotten her. He'd left her behind deliberately, after 6 months of courtship and a promise of marriage in Silverdale, a convenient way to end their engagement without confrontation. The station was nearly deserted now, a small wooden structure standing alone against the backdrop of distant mountains. Sophia checked her reticule, finding only 2 pennies and a ticket stub. The next eastbound train wouldn't arrive for 3 days, and the westbound coach wouldn't return for a week. She had no money for a room, no food, and no prospects. Night was falling fast, and with it came the chill of the mountain air. Sophia hugged herself, fighting back tears as she watched the station master lock up the small building, nodding politely in her direction before heading to his quarters behind the station. The sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. A lone rider approached from the west, silhouetted against the dying sun. As he drew closer, Sophia could make out the broad shoulders, the dusty clothes, and the well-worn hat of a man who spent his life in the saddle. The stranger dismounted, a tall figure leading a chestnut stallion toward the water trough. He noticed her sitting alone on her trunk, and Sophia quickly averted her gaze, afraid of drawing attention to herself. A proper lady didn't engage with unknown men, especially not in her vulnerable position. "Madam," the stranger's voice was deep and tinged with concern. "Station's closed, coach left about an hour ago." Sophia looked up, meeting a pair of piercing blue eyes under the brim of a weathered hat. The man before her was not what she'd expected. His face was tanned from the sun, with a strong jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard, but his expression held nothing but gentle concern. "Yes," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm aware. You waitin' for someone?" he asked, tying his horse to a post. "No," Sophia replied, summoning what dignity she could. I seem to have been left behind." The stranger removed his hat, revealing thick, sandy brown hair. "Left behind on purpose. It appears my fiancé." The word caught in her throat. "Former fiancé decided our engagement had reached its conclusion." The man's expression darkened. "He left you here, alone, with no means of transport." Sophia nodded, unable to trust her voice. The humiliation of her situation was overwhelming. "The name's Flynn Callahan," he said, extending a hand. "Most folks call me Flynn." "Sophia Pierce," she replied, barely touching his hand as propriety demanded. Flynn gestured to the darkening sky. "Night's coming on. Have you arrangements for lodging, Miss Pierce?" "Aye." Sophia felt her face flush with embarrassment. "I find myself without sufficient funds at present." Understanding dawned in Flynn's eyes. He glanced around the deserted station, then back at her. "There's a decent hotel in town about a mile down the road and a restaurant that serves a fine meal." "That's very kind, but as I mentioned, I'd be happy to escort you there," Flynn continued. "And see to your dinner and lodging for the night." Sophia stiffened. "I couldn't possibly accept such charity from a stranger." Flynn smiled, and it transformed his weathered face. "Not charity, Miss Pierce, just one traveler helping another. I reckon you'd do the same if our situations were reversed." Something in his straightforward manner eased Sophia's fears. Still, she hesitated. "I have no way to repay you." "Good company during dinner would be payment enough," Flynn replied. "Been riding alone for 3 days. Conversation with someone who doesn't have 4 legs would be a welcome change." Despite herself, Sophia laughed softly. "I suppose I could provide that much at least." Flynn nodded, picking up her trunk with ease. "This all you got?" Yes, Sophia said, rising to her feet. My other belongings continued on without me. Flynn secured her trunk to his saddle, then turned to her. I'm afraid we'll have to share the horse. Town's too far to walk in those shoes. Sophia glanced down at her impractical city boots, then at the imposing stallion. I've never ridden astride. No time like the present for new experiences, Flynn said, his eyes twinkling. I promise Rusty here is gentle as they come. With as much grace as she could muster, Sophia allowed Flynn to help her onto the horse, settling uncomfortably into the saddle while trying to maintain some semblance of modesty with her skirts. Flynn swung up behind her, his solid presence both reassuring and alarmingly intimate. As they rode toward the small town, Sophia's mind raced. Her entire future had vanished with Harrison's betrayal. She had been traveling to Montana to be married, leaving behind her aunt's home in Boston after her parents' deaths had left her with few options. Now she had no fiancé, no home to return to, and was at the mercy of a stranger's kindness. The town of Pine Creek appeared before them, a collection of wooden buildings lining a main street, with oil lamps already glowing in windows. Flynn guided his horse to a two-story building with a sign proclaiming it the Frontier Hotel. It's not fancy, Flynn said as he helped her down, his strong hands at her waist, but it's clean and the owner, Mrs. Winters, is a good woman. The hotel lobby was modest but welcoming, with a small fireplace and simple furnishings. A plump woman with gray-streaked hair looked up from behind a desk. Flynn Callahan, haven't seen you in these parts for months, she exclaimed warmly. Been working cattle up north, Flynn replied. Mrs. Winters, this is Miss Sophia Pierce. She needs a room for a few nights. Mrs. Winters' keen eyes took in Sophia's travel-worn appearance and the single trunk. Of course, we've got a nice room on the second floor. I'll be covering Miss Pierce's expenses, Flynn said quietly, stepping forward to pay. Mrs. Winters raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she accepted the money and handed Sophia a key. Room 4, top of the stairs on the right. There's fresh water in the pitcher, and I can have a hot bath sent up if you'd like. That would be wonderful, thank you, Sophia said, overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. Flynn carried her trunk upstairs, setting it down in a simple but clean room with a narrow bed, washstand, and small window overlooking the main street. I'll wait downstairs, he said. Take your time freshening up. The restaurant across the street serves dinner until 8. Alone in the room, Sophia finally allowed herself a moment of weakness. She sank onto the bed and let the tears come, silent sobs shaking her shoulders. Harrison's betrayal, her uncertain future, and this stranger's unexpected kindness all overwhelmed her. After her bath, Sophia changed into her only other dress, a simple blue cotton that had been packed in her handbag for the journey. She pinned her honey brown hair back into a simple chignon and wiped the last traces of tears from her face. Flynn was waiting in the lobby, hat in hands, his hair combed and face freshly washed. Something fluttered in Sophia's chest at the sight of him standing there, tall and solid, waiting for her. Feel better? He asked with a gentle smile. Much, thank you, she replied. Though I find myself woefully unprepared for an extended stay. We can see about getting you some necessities tomorrow, Flynn said, offering his arm. For now, let's get some food in you. The restaurant was busy but not crowded, filled with the murmur of conversation and the clinking of cutlery. The hostess led them to a corner table, and Flynn held Sophia's chair with unexpected gallantry. Over plates of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread, Sophia found herself telling Flynn her story, her parents' death from influenza 3 years prior, her strained life with a reluctant aunt, and the correspondence courtship with Harrison Wells that had promised a new beginning. He was a business associate of my late father, Sophia explained. We exchanged letters for nearly a year before he proposed. I thought. She paused, focusing on cutting her meat. I thought he cared for me. Flynn's expression darkened. Man who abandons a woman at a remote station doesn't deserve the title of gentleman. Perhaps he realized I wasn't what he wanted, Sophia said softly. Then he should have had the courage to tell you to your face, Flynn replied firmly. Not leave you stranded with no money and no way home. Sophia looked up, meeting his intense gaze. "And what about you, Mr. Callahan? What brings you to Pine Creek?" "Just passing through," Flynn said, leaning back in his chair. "I work cattle mostly, moving from ranch to ranch as the seasons change. Been doing it since I was 16. "No permanent home?" Sophia asked. A shadow crossed Flynn's face. "Had one once, lost it in the war." Sophia didn't need to ask which war. The Civil War had ended 10 years ago, but its scars remained on the land and its people. "I'm sorry," Flynn shrugged. "Been a long time now. I've gotten used to the moving. Freedom to go where I please has its advantages." As they finished their meal, Sophia's worry returned. "I need to find work," she said suddenly. "I can't impose on your kindness indefinitely." "No need to figure everything out tonight," Flynn said. "When's the next eastbound train?" 3 days from now, but I can't afford a ticket back to Boston," Sophia admitted. "And truthfully, there's nothing for me there anymore." Flynn considered this. "Pine Creek's growing, might be opportunities here. What skills do you have?" Sophia hesitated. Her education had been that of a proper Boston lady: music, French, watercolors, and household management. None seemed particularly useful on the frontier. "I can read and write well," she offered. "I kept my father's correspondence in his final years, and I'm good with figures." "I managed my aunt's household accounts." Flynn nodded thoughtfully. "That's more than many have out here. Let me ask around tomorrow. Town this size, everybody knows everybody's business." They walked back to the hotel in comfortable silence. At the foot of the stairs, Sophia turned to him. "Thank you, Mr. Callahan, not just for the meal and lodging, but for your kindness. I don't know what I would have done, Flynn," he interrupted gently. "Just Flynn." "Flynn," she repeated, the name feeling strangely intimate on her lips. "I don't know how to repay you." "No need," he said simply. "Get some rest, Sophia. Tomorrow's a new day." As she climbed the stairs to her room, Sophia felt something she hadn't expected: a flicker of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, Harrison's betrayal wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of a new one. Morning came with golden light streaming through the thin curtains of Sophia's room. For a moment, she was disoriented, then the memories of yesterday came flooding back: Harrison's betrayal, being stranded, and Flynn Callahan's unexpected rescue. She dressed quickly in her blue dress, now slightly wrinkled, and made her way downstairs. Mrs. Winters was setting out coffee and biscuits in the small dining area. "Good morning, dear," the older woman said warmly. "Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you," Sophia replied, accepting a cup of strong coffee. "Flynn asked me to tell you he's gone to speak with some folks in town about work possibilities," Mrs. Winters said, studying Sophia with kind but assessing eyes. "Said he'd be back before noon." Sophia nodded, relief and disappointment mingling at his absence. "He's been very kind, Mrs. Winters smiled knowingly. "Flynn's a good man, one of the best I know, and I've known plenty who weren't worth the powder to blow them to kingdom come." "Have you known him long?" Sophia asked, trying to sound casual. "Since he came back from the war," Mrs. Winters replied, lowering her voice. "Lost everything: family farm in Virginia. His parents' younger brother died at Gettysburg, came west with nothing but his horse and the clothes on his back." Sophia's heart ached for the young man Flynn must have been, returning from war to find everything gone. "He seems at peace with his life." "Made peace with it, more like," Mrs. Winters corrected. "Man like that, moving from place to place, never staying long. He's still looking for something, whether he knows it or not." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another hotel guest, and Sophia was left to contemplate Mrs. Winters' words as she finished her breakfast. After eating, Sophia ventured outside, determined to familiarize herself with Pine Creek. The town was larger than she'd initially thought, with a main street boasting a general store, bank, saloon, doctor's office, and several other businesses. She was standing outside the general store, eyeing the window display of fabric and notions, when a voice called her name. Flynn approached, leading his horse, his face brightening when he spotted her. "There you are, thought you might still be resting." "I wanted to see the town," Sophia explained. "It's larger than I expected." "Growing every month," Flynn agreed. "The railroad coming through last year changed everything." He hesitated, then added, "I might have found you something." Sophia's pulse quickened. "Already," Flynn nodded. "Town's getting a proper schoolhouse built. Teacher they hired from back east sent word she's not coming. Mayor's looking for someone educated to teach the children until they can find a permanent replacement." A teacher, Sophia echoed, both excited and terrified by the prospect. I've never taught before. You said you can read and write, know your figures, Flynn pointed out. That's more than some of these children get at home. It's only for a few months, but it comes with room and board at the mayor's house. The opportunity seemed almost too good to be true. When would I start? Mayor wants to meet you this afternoon, Flynn said. School's set to begin next week. Sophia's mind raced with the possibilities. Teaching wasn't something she'd ever considered, but it was respectable work, and the provision of room and board would solve her immediate problem of shelter. I think I'd like to try, she said finally. Thank you for arranging this. Flynn smiled, a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Didn't arrange anything. Just mentioned to the mayor that a well-educated Boston lady was stranded in town looking for honest work. They walked together down the street, Flynn leading his horse, as he pointed out various landmarks and introduced her to people they passed. Everyone seemed to know him, greeting him with genuine warmth. You seem to have many friends here for someone who's just passing through, Sophia observed. Flynn shrugged. I winter here most years. Work the big spreads north of here in summer, come back when the snow flies. And where will you go now? Sophia asked, trying to sound casual. Circle M Ranch needs hands for the spring cattle drive, Flynn replied, heading there tomorrow. Sophia felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. She'd known him less than a day, yet the thought of his departure left her feeling strangely bereft. The mayor, a portly man named Willard Bennett, greeted them warmly at his office. His interview with Sophia was brief but thorough, and he seemed impressed by her education and demeanor. We're desperate for someone to teach these children, Mayor Bennett admitted. Some haven't had proper schooling in years. The position pays $20 a month plus room and board with my family until the schoolhouse is completed. When would I begin? Sophia asked. Monday, the mayor replied. That gives you 3 days to prepare. There are about 15 children of various ages. We have some books and slates, but you'll need to develop your own lessons. Sophia agreed to the terms, her mind already racing with plans for how to organize classes for children of different ages and abilities. As they left the mayor's office, she felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. You'll do fine, Flynn said, seeming to read her thoughts. Those kids need someone who cares. I hope I don't disappoint them, Sophia said softly. You won't. Flynn's confidence in her was unwavering. They spent the afternoon at the general store, where Flynn insisted on purchasing necessary items for Sophia: a nightgown, undergarments, a second dress, and basic toiletries. Sophia protested the expense, but Flynn was adamant. Consider it an investment in Pine Creek's education, he said with a grin. Besides, you'll be earning your own way soon enough. As the shopkeeper wrapped their purchases, Sophia caught Flynn watching her, a thoughtful expression on his face. When their eyes met, he didn't look away, and something silent passed between them that made her heart beat faster. That evening, they dined again at the restaurant, the conversation flowing more easily between them. Flynn told stories of his cattle drives, of sleeping under the stars and facing stampedes, while Sophia shared memories of Boston's crowded streets and cultural events. Sounds like another world, Flynn said, shaking his head. Can't imagine living with so many people pressed together. It has its charms, Sophia admitted, but I'm finding Pine Creek has its own appeal. As they walked back to the hotel, the night air cool around them, Flynn seemed to be wrestling with something. Finally, he stopped beneath a large oak tree at the edge of the town square. I'm leaving at first light, he said, his voice low. The Circle M is a day's ride north, Sophia nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. I understand, you've already done more than enough for me. I'd like to check on you when I return, Flynn said, the words coming out in a rush. Make sure you're settling in all right. I'd like that, Sophia replied, warmth spreading through her chest. Flynn took a step closer, and in the moonlight, his features seemed softer, more vulnerable. I don't make a habit of rescuing stranded women, he said with a slight smile. There's something about you, Sophia Pierce. Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. I want you to have this, he said, pressing it into her palm. Sophia opened her hand to find a simple silver ring with a small turquoise stone. "Flynn, I couldn't possibly, it was my mother's," he explained. "Not worth much in money, but it's one of the few things I have from before the war. I want you to keep it, as a promise." "A promise," Sophia echoed, her heart hammering. "That I'll come back," Flynn said simply. "And that you'll still be here when I do." Sophia closed her fingers around the ring, emotion tightening her throat. "I'll keep it safe for you," Flynn nodded, seemingly satisfied. They walked the rest of the way to the hotel in a charged silence, both aware that something significant had shifted between them. At the hotel entrance, Flynn took her hand, raising it briefly to his lips in a gesture that belonged more to drawing rooms than frontier towns. "Good night, Sophia." "I'll see you in a few weeks." "Good night, Flynn," she whispered, watching as he turned and walked toward the livery stable where he'd arranged to sleep in her room. Sophia opened her hand and examined the ring in the lamplight. It was simple but beautiful, the silver band well worn and the turquoise stone catching the light. She slipped it onto her finger, surprised to find it fit perfectly. As she prepared for bed, she wondered at how quickly life could change from abandoned and desperate to employed and what? She wasn't sure what was developing between her and Flynn Callahan, but for the first time since discovering Harrison's betrayal, she felt a flutter of anticipation for what the future might hold. The next morning, Sophia rose early, hoping to see Flynn before he departed. She hurried downstairs only to find Mrs. Winters alone in the dining area. "He left at first light, dear," the older woman said gently. "Asked me to give you this." She handed Sophia a folded piece of paper. Inside, in a surprisingly neat hand, Flynn had written, "Sophia, the mayor's wife will come for you and your things this afternoon. Trust yourself, you'll make a fine teacher. Keep my mother's ring close. I'll return when the cattle drive is done." Sophia folded the note carefully and tucked it into her pocket next to the ring, which she decided not to wear publicly. Whatever was growing between them was too new, too fragile to expose to the curious eyes of Pine Creek. True to Flynn's word, Mrs. Bennett arrived that afternoon, a kind, chatty woman who welcomed Sophia warmly and helped her move into a small but comfortable room in the Bennett home. The next days passed in a whirlwind of preparation as Sophia met her future students, organized lesson plans, and familiarized herself with the town. The temporary schoolroom, set up in the church until the schoolhouse was completed, was basic but functional. Sophia's first day of teaching was chaotic but exhilarating. The children, ranging from 6 to 16, had widely varying levels of education, but all seemed eager to learn. Days turned into weeks as Sophia settled into her new role. She found unexpected joy in teaching, watching her students' faces light up with understanding, nurturing their curiosity, and guiding their learning. The townspeople welcomed her, inviting her to social gatherings and treating her with respect. But each night, alone in her room, Sophia would take out Flynn's ring and wonder where he was, what he was doing, and when or if he would return. She chided herself for these thoughts. After all, she barely knew the man. Yet something about his straightforward manner, his quiet strength, and the unexpected gentleness beneath his rugged exterior had touched her in ways Harrison never had. 5 weeks after Flynn's departure, Sophia was walking home from the schoolroom when she heard the commotion. A group of riders was entering town, dust rising from beneath their horses' hooves. Her heart leapt at the sight of a familiar chestnut stallion and its rider. Flynn spotted her immediately, breaking away from the group and riding toward her. He dismounted in one fluid motion, standing before her with his hat in his hands, his face tanned even darker from weeks in the sun. "Miss Pierce," he said formally, though his eyes were warm. "Hoped I'd find you still here, Mr. Callahan," she replied, equally formal despite the joy bubbling inside her. "Pine Creek has been treating me well. Glad to hear it." He glanced around at the curious onlookers. "I've got business to attend to, but I'd be honored if you'd join me for dinner tonight." "I'd like that," Sophia said, smiling. That evening, dressed in her best gown, a new one she'd had made from fabric purchased with her first month's wages, Sophia met Flynn at the restaurant. He'd cleaned up, his hair still damp from washing, wearing a fresh shirt and what appeared to be new trousers. "You look beautiful," he said simply as she approached. "Thank you," Sophia replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You look quite handsome yourself." Over dinner, Flynn told her about the cattle drive, the long days in the saddle, the nights watching for rustlers, the camaraderie among the cowboys. Sophia shared stories of her students, the progress of the schoolhouse construction, and her growing friendships in town. "Sounds like you're making a place for yourself here," Flynn observed. "I am," Sophia agreed. "It's strange, a month ago I was devastated when Harrison abandoned me. Now I can almost thank him for it." Flynn's expression darkened at the mention of Harrison. "Still doesn't excuse what he did." "No," Sophia agreed, "but sometimes good things can come from bad situations." She hesitated, then reached into her pocket, pulling out the ring. "I've kept it safe, as promised." Lynn's eyes softened at the sight of it. "I'd like you to keep it, Sophia, not just to hold, but to have." Sophia's breath caught. "Flynn, I'm not proposing," he clarified quickly. "Not yet. That wouldn't be right, us knowing each other so brief a time, but I want you to have something of mine, something that matters. Are you staying in Pine Creek?" Sophia asked, the question that had been foremost in her mind. Flynn nodded. "For a while. Took a job as foreman at the Circle M. Owners getting on in years, needs someone to manage the hands." He paused. "It's year-round work, a chance to settle, maybe." The implication hung between them, full of possibility. "I'd like to court you properly, Sophia," Flynn said finally, "if you're willing." Sophia felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the restaurant's fireplace. "I'd like that very much." The weeks that followed took on a golden quality for Sophia. Flynn called on her regularly, taking her for rides in the countryside, accompanying her to church socials, and simply walking with her through town in the evenings after her teaching duties were done. Their conversations ranged from childhood memories to dreams for the future, each revelation bringing them closer. Flynn was unlike any man Sophia had known in Boston, straightforward, where they had been evasive, genuine, where they had been calculating. He spoke his mind and kept his word, traits Sophia found increasingly valuable. As summer turned to fall, the new schoolhouse was completed, a sturdy building with large windows and proper desks for the students. Sophia moved from the Bennett's home to a small cabin behind the schoolhouse, provided as part of her position, which had been extended indefinitely when the school board realized no better teacher was likely to be found. Flynn helped her move, building shelves for her books and a bench for her small porch. As they worked together, Sophia felt a deepening contentment. She wore his mother's ring now on a chain around her neck, a constant reminder of the promise between them. One crisp October evening, Flynn took her riding to a ridge overlooking Pine Creek. The valley below was painted in autumn colors, the town's buildings small in the distance. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Flynn said as they dismounted. "Breathtaking," Sophia agreed, taking in the view. Flynn turned to her, his expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, Sophia, about what I want." Sophia's heart quickened. "And what is that?" "For the first time since the war, I want to put down roots," Flynn said, taking her hands in his. "I've been offered the chance to buy into the Circle M. Old man Jenkins has no heirs, wants to retire in a few years, says I've got a good head for the business." "Flynn, that's wonderful," Sophia said sincerely. "Thing is," Flynn continued, his voice growing softer, "a ranch needs more than just a man to run it. It needs a heart, a center." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "This isn't my mother's ring, that one was a promise, this one is a question." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small diamond. "I love you, Sophia Pierce. These past months, getting to know you, watching you build a life here, you're the bravest, strongest woman I've ever known. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears filled Sophia's eyes as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Flynn, I will marry you." Flynn slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms, his kiss tender and filled with promise. When they broke apart, both were smiling through tears. "I never thought I'd find happiness again after losing everything in the war," Flynn admitted. "Then I saw you sitting alone at that station, and something told me my life was about to change. I thought Harrison abandoning me was the end of my dreams," Sophia said. "Instead, it was the beginning of something far better than I could have imagined." They were married 2 weeks later in Pine Creek's small church, with the entire town in attendance. Mrs. Winters wept openly, claiming she'd known from the first night that they were meant for each other. Sophia wore a cream-colored dress she'd sewn herself, with Flynn's mother's turquoise ring now attached to a small brooch at her collar, something old to complement her new beginning. Their first home was a small cabin on the Circle M Ranch, which Flynn gradually expanded and improved as their partnership in the ranch grew. Sophia continued teaching for a year, then passed the position to a young woman from Denver when she learned she was expecting their first child. Frederick James Callahan was born on a snowy January night in 1877, with Flynn pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door until the doctor announced he had a healthy son. When Flynn held his son for the first time, the look of wonder on his face made Sophia fall in love with him all over again. "He's perfect," Flynn whispered, gently touching the infant's tiny fingers, just like his mother. Life on the Circle M settled into a rhythm of seasons: spring cattle drives, summer haying, fall roundups, and winter planning. Old man Jenkins retired fully 3 years after their marriage, selling his remaining interest in the ranch to Flynn and Sophia. They renamed it the Circle CS, combining their initials. Their family grew with the addition of twin daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, in 1879, and another son, Thomas, in 1881. The original small cabin expanded into a proper ranch house, with a wide porch where the family gathered on summer evenings to watch the sunset over the mountains. Sophia found an unexpected fulfillment in ranch life. She managed the household accounts, taught their children to read and write before they were old enough for the town school, and even learned to ride astride and help with the cattle when extra hands were needed. The refined Boston lady had transformed into a capable ranch wife, though she still insisted on certain civilized touches: books lining the shelves, music in the evenings, and proper manners at the dinner table. Flynn thrived as a rancher, his natural leadership and fair dealings earning him respect throughout the territory. The Circle CS prospered under his management, expanding its operations and weathering the hard times that occasionally struck the cattle industry. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Flynn surprised Sophia with a trip back east, taking her to see the sights of New York and Boston. In Boston, they even called upon Sophia's aunt, who was astonished to see her niece so transformed, confident, happy, and clearly adored by her handsome husband. "I hardly recognize you, Sophia," her aunt remarked over tea in her formal parlor. "I'm still the same person, Aunt," Sophia replied with a smile, "just living a different life than the one you imagined for me." "A better one, I think," her aunt admitted, eyeing Flynn with newfound respect. "You have a light in your eyes I never saw before." Returning to Montana after a month away, Sophia felt a surge of joy as the familiar landscape came into view from the train window. Flynn took her hand, seeming to understand her feelings without words. "Home," he said simply. "Yes," Sophia agreed, squeezing his hand. "Home." As the years passed, Pine Creek grew from a small frontier town into a bustling community. The railroad brought new settlers, businesses flourished, and the one-room schoolhouse expanded to accommodate the growing population of children. The Callahan children grew to Frederick following in his father's footsteps with a gift for ranching, the twins developing their mother's love of books and teaching, and Thomas showing an aptitude for medicine that eventually took him east to medical school. On a warm summer evening in 1895, 20 years after Flynn had first found Sophia sitting alone at the train station, they sat together on their porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Their children were either grown or nearly so, the ranch was prosperous, and life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Flynn reached over and took Sophia's hand, his touch still sending a flutter through her heart after all these years. She wore both rings now, his mother's turquoise on her right hand and her wedding band on her left. "Do you ever think about that day?" Flynn asked. "When your fiancé left you stranded," Sophia smiled. "Sometimes it's hard to believe I was ever that devastated." "It turned out to be the luckiest day of my life." Flynn brought her hand to his lips. "Mine too, though I didn't know it at the time." "What made you stop?" Sophia asked, a question she'd wondered about for years. That day at the station, you could have ridden past. Flynn was quiet for a moment, considering. Something in your face, he finally said. You looked lost, but not broken, like you had fight left in you. I admired that. Sophia leaned her head against his shoulder. I'm glad you stopped. So am I, Flynn replied, his arms slipping around her waist. Every day for 20 years, I've been glad. They sat in comfortable silence as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, the first stars appearing overhead. From inside the house came the sounds of their youngest children preparing for bed, their voices drifting through the open windows. We built something good here, Flynn said softly, his voice filled with quiet pride. Yes, Sophia agreed, thinking of the frightened young woman she'd been, abandoned and alone, something better than I ever dreamed possible. In the distance, a train whistle sounded, the evening express arriving in Pine Creek. Sophia smiled at the sound that had once represented her greatest despair and now simply marked the rhythm of days in the place she called home. I love you, Flynn Callahan, she said, turning to look into the face she knew better than her own, older now, lined with years of sun and wind and laughter, but still with those same piercing blue eyes that had first looked at her with kindness when she needed it most. And I love you, Sophia Callahan, he replied, leaning in to kiss her softly, from that first day until my last. As darkness settled over the ranch, they remained on the porch, two people who had found in each other not just love, but home, proving that sometimes the end of one journey is merely the beginning of a far greater adventure. 5 years later, when their youngest son Thomas returned from medical school in the East, he brought with him a newspaper clipping a small obituary notice for Harrison Wells, once a prominent businessman, who had died alone and in financial ruin. I thought you might want to see this, Thomas said, handing the clipping to his mother. Sophia read it silently, feeling no triumph or bitterness, only a vague sadness for a man who had never known what she had found, the joy of a life built on love and trust rather than convenience and social standing. Poor man, she said finally, folding the paper and handing it back to her son. He did me the greatest favor of my life, though he never knew it. That evening, she showed the clipping to Flynn as they sat by the fire in their bedroom. Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if he hadn't abandoned you? Flynn asked, watching her face carefully. Sophia shook her head. No, that life wasn't meant for me. This one was. She reached for his hand. With you, Flynn pulled her close, his arms still strong despite the passing years. Sometimes I think about sending that man a thank you letter, he said with a wry smile. For being fool enough to leave behind the greatest treasure in Montana territory. Sophia laughed, the sound as youthful and joyful as it had been when they first met. I prefer to thank the cowboy who stopped to help a stranded woman, who bought her a meal and eventually gave her a wedding ring. Best decision I ever made, Flynn said, kissing her forehead. Outside their window, the vast Montana sky stretched endlessly, filled with stars that had witnessed their journey from strangers to lovers to partners in life. The same stars that had shone down on a lonely train station 25 years earlier, where a chance encounter had changed 2 lives forever. In the years that followed, the Callahan family continued to flourish. Their children married and had children of their own, expanding the family and bringing new life to the Circle CS ranch. Frederick took over more of the daily operations as Flynn gradually stepped back, though he never lost his love for the land or the cattle that had been his livelihood for so long. Sophia, her hair now streaked with silver but her spirit undimmed, became known throughout the region for her wisdom and kindness. Young couples sought her advice, new settlers turned to her for help in adjusting to frontier life, and her grandchildren adored her stories of Boston and her early days in Montana. In 1915, 40 years after their first meeting, Flynn and Sophia celebrated their anniversary with a gathering that brought together 4 generations of Callahans. As they stood together, surrounded by their family, Flynn leaned close to whisper in her ear. Not bad for a stranded lady and a passing cowboy, he said, his eyes twinkling with the same light that had first captured her heart. Sophia smiled up at him, her hand automatically finding his. The best kind of story, she replied. the kind that never really ends, and she was right. For in the hearts of their children, grandchildren, and all who knew them, the story of Flynn and Sophia Callahan of a chance meeting at a train station, a meal shared, a ring given in promise, and a love that built a legacy would live on long after they were gone, a testament to the power of kindness, courage, and the unexpected journeys that lead us home.